from RTO. Welcome to Marathon Wednesday, and today we've got yet another viewer's request. There's plenty of viewers' requests for some really long catalogues, and today I've got a visual clue who we're doing today. The Horns of Angus, so it's AC/DC today. I got these on the Rockle Bust tour at Hampden Park. We was handed these and it was all good fun. End of props, down to the nitty gritty stuff of it. AC/DC then. They were formed in Sydney by Malcolm and Angus Young. Obviously they've got an older brother, George Young, that was in the Mindbenders. It was their sister that come up with the name. Formed in 1973. They've had some torrid times, but they are a brilliant band. They've been described as hard rock, heavy metal. No, they're not heavy metal. But all the bands say that they simply call it rock and roll, because that's all it really is. 17 albums, and we'll get cracking. Now, before we do start, I love AC/DC. They've never made a bad album, and I honestly can think there's songs that I don't like by AC/DC I can count on one hand. There's some good ones, there's some okay ones, but they're not any that I'll go, oh, I don't like that. I like every AC/DC album, but there are reasons why that, you know, we've got to have a number 17 and we've got to have a number 1. So coming in at number 17, we have the 11th album from 1988, Blow Up Your Video. This was the last album that Simon Wright drummed on. So the lineup for this album was Brian Johnson. I'm not going to tell you what they do, because we all know what they do. Angus Young and Malcolm Young, Cliff Williams and Simon Wright. First track on is the ball belting Heat Seeker. It's great, isn't it? Great stuff. Love the video to this. Brian's rocking. Some great guitar riffs and all the good stuff that you expect from an AC/DC song. Second track, my favourite on the album, That's the Way I Want to Rock and Roll. Does what it says on the tin, doesn't it? Great track. Mean Streak. Good riffs. Malcolm's strong riffs here. It's not a bad track at all. Go Zone. They're solid track. Great vocal from Brian on that one. Kissing Dynamite. Okay, this is one of the weaker songs on the album, but it's not bad at all. It's just not one of my favourites. It's got some nice guitar riffs in it as usual. Pretty cool. Nick of Time. Love the start of that. Cliff Williams, thundering bass. Great little vocal from Brian on that, and you get your usual great little guitar licks from Angus. Something for Nothing. Again, it's one of them mediocre tracks. It's not the best track on the album, but it still rocks. Rough Stuff. Typical AC/DC song. Great riffs. Good guitar solo. Two's Up. More of those driving riffs. Pretty good. The last track, This Means War. One of these great little short banging head rocking tracks. Great guitar work for Malcolm on this. Here comes Twinkle Toes. Since we've moved into this new place, it's all The floors are all clippity cloppy, clips or clops around. Hold on, I've got to let it. Come on then. Sorry about this, folks. Come on, Rock. Come on then. Come on. That's it. Sorry, folks, but he couldn't get through the gap. There we go. So yeah, this is me more. It's great. Short, sharp, and straight to the point. Okay, this album. It's an enjoyable album. I think what sort of lets it down a little bit is some of the production. I don't like some of the sound drums on this. I mean, Simon Wright, good drummer, but I don't think he quite fitted in with the AC/DC drumming. I mean, it's very hard hack to follow, isn't it, Phil Rudd? I don't think he hadn't got the. I don't know. There's just something about him. I think he's great. When he went on and went with Dio, he was brilliant. But I think this just lacks a little bit more beef in the drums. But it's still a good album, and I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 6.5. Okay, coming in number 16. 1985. This was the first tour I saw them on. Released in 1985. 10th album, Fly on the Wall. First to feature Simon Wright. So it's Brian, Angus, Malcolm, Cliff and Simon. Opens up with the title track, Fly on the Wall. What an opening riff. But the letdown is the production on Brian's vocal and the drums. I love the track, don't get me wrong, it's brilliant live. That's one good thing. I've seen them do this live, of course, and it's belting. Great song, poor production. Second track, Shake Your Foundations. Another great track. Again, brilliant guitar work from Angus, great solo, but it's that production. But the good thing about this, when they brought out the soundtrack to Who Made Who, I think they re-recorded it or did something with it, because it sounds a lot better on the Who Made Who album. It's a great track live again, brilliant. First Blood, again got some great riffs, great guitar work, but it's the vocals that let it down. Danger, bit different for AC/DC, but it's probably the most clearest vocals on the album. Bit quirky, alright. Let me get my favourite, Sink the Pink. Love the video to this. I love the fly dancing on the pool ball. Great guitar solo from Angus. The vocal doesn't sound too bad on this one either. Pretty cool track. Playing with Girls. Oh, opening riff for Malcolm. Blows you out. But again, that production just let us down a little bit. Stand Up. Good song, bad production. Hell on High Water. Again, strong riffs, good guitar solo, just let down by the production. Back in Business again, it's one of them tracks, it's just the poor production. I do like the track. Send for the Man, more classic guitar work from Angus. The production isn't too bad on this one, it's just the drum sounds awful. Okay, this AC/DC album, Fly on the Wall, it's got some great tracks on it. I would love them to remix this. I really would, because I think it's a very underrated album that's been let down by the poor production. I think they produced this themselves, but the tracks you hear live, I mean, they don't play much off this album live, but I've got recordings of this, some of the tracks from this album live, and they're brilliant. They sound absolutely brilliant live. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 7 out of 10. Coming in at number 15 then. The 15th album, released in 2008. Sadly, it was Malcolm's last studio album before he retired. But the lineup on here is Brian, Phil, Cliff, Angus and Malcolm. Solid tracks on this, good album, but a lengthy album. Opens up with a brilliant Rock and Roll Train. Love this track. Classic AC/DC, isn't it? Skies on Fire. Great drumming from Mr. Rudd. And then you got Malcolm's great little riffs in this. Superb track. Big Jack. Cliff Williams shines on this one. That awesome bass line he comes up with. It's solid, it's steady, it's tight. It's brilliant. Anything Goes. Now, this is one of them little quirky songs from AC/DC. It's got a nice little beat to it. Really, really good. Then we get my favourite track, War Machine. Here we go again, Cliff Williams. Him and Phil Rudd are probably the ultimate engine room in a rock band. They are so tight together. They seem to, they've been playing together for years, and they just seem to know what each other's doing, and they're absolutely on fire on that track. Smash and Grab, again one of them great riffy AC/DC songs. Angus on Fire, Phil thumping away, brilliant stuff. Spoiling for a Fight, again typical AC/DC, does what it says on the tin. Wheels. This is all right. We're now getting into the album where there's some tracks here that are weaker ones, but they're not bad. This is one of them. Then we get Decibel, pretty good track. Great guitar solo from Mr. Angus Young. Stormy Mayday. It's okay. Not one of my favourites. I don't dislike the track, but it's just one that I'm not particularly a big fan of. She Likes Rock and Roll. It's okay, nothing wrong with it. The standard rock and roll, really. Money Made. Again, pleasant enough track. Got some nice riffs in it. Rock and Roll Dream. I think this one's a little bit of a filler. It's all right. I'm not saying that it's a terrible filler, but by track 13, you're starting to get a little bit. It's a long album. It's the longest one they ever made with tracks. And then we got Rocking All the Way. Quite quirky, catchy, nice. And the title track, Black Ice, isn't a bad track either. As I said, although this is a damn good album, there are just too many tracks on this. You sort of start getting lost by the time you get down to track 10. But it's still got some great tracks on, and I do like this album. Don't get me wrong, I don't dislike it. I just think it's a little bit too long. So I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 7.5. Okay then, coming in number 14. We go to the year 2000. For 14th album, Stiff Upper Lip. We've got that classic lineup, of course. Brian, Angus, Malcolm, Cliff and Phil. Opens up with Stiff Upper Lip. Love the drums on this. That real deep sound that Phil Rudd gets. And I love Brian's smoky voice on this. It's absolutely brilliant with that stiff upper lip. It's just great stuff. Meltdown, a great little bluesy rocky here. Love these bluesy rock tracks that AC/DC do. House of Jazz, solid track, pretty cool stuff. My favourite track then, Hold Me Back. it's just the classic AC/DC sound in it. Cliff Williams, little licks from Angus, thumping bass drum on here from Phil. Awesome stuff. Safe in New York City. It's a pretty good track. Like that one a lot. Can't Stand Still. Bit of a Thunderstruck type thing. Still some great work from Angus. Can't Stop Rock and Roll. It's a good track, but it's not the best one on the album. Satellite Blues. AC/DC. Classic. Does what it says on the tin. Damned. Great vocal. Solid track from Brian. Come and Get It. Some great drumming on here from Phil Rudd. Awesome stuff. All Screwed Up. Great guitar work from Malcolm and Angus on that. Work well together, of course. They're brothers. They just sort of know how to look into it. They know what they're doing, don't they? Give It Up. Again, solid track. Awesome. Solid album in their career that was a little bit dormant, but it's got some stonking tracks on it. I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 7.6. Okay, number 13, 16th album, released in 2014, Rockle Bust. First album to see Stevie Young, nephew of Malcolm and Angus. So this was a new beginning for the band. First, it must have been strange for Angus not having his brother there. So we've got Brian, Angus, Stevie Young, Cliff Williams and Phil Rudd, who didn't tour on this because he'd been a rather naughty boy. So on the tour we had Chris Slade filling in. So the first track, Rockle Bust. Great opening track to an AC/DC album. Saw them at Hampden Park on this tour, as you know. Opened up with this and it was brilliant. Great track. Then we get the quirky Play Ball. Some great guitar playing. Stevie did a good job on this. Hard job filling the boots of your uncle, but he's done a good job. Rock the Blues Away. Solid track. Great little track. Misadventure. This is mystical AC/DC to me. It's a little bit different, but it's pretty good. Dogs of War, favourite track on this album. I love that. I do love the AC/DC backing vocal. What I like about it is, especially on stage, for those of us seen AC/DC, you've got Brian and Angus at the front doing their bit. And it doesn't matter. I mean, the classic you got, usually on your left you've got Cliff Williams, on the right Malcolm or Stevie. When there's a little bit of backing vocal, up they come, do their bit and walk back. It's just great how they're set up, and whoever's drumming, I've seen them with all three drummers, they just carry on the beat. Fantastic. Good track. Got some rock and roll thunder. Great riffs. Great riffs from Stevie Young. He just plays as good as, well, I think he is as good as Malcolm. But then when you're in the Young family, you're born to rock. Hard Times. Great bass line on here. Brilliant stuff. Baptism of Fire. By Fire, sorry. Good little rocker from AC/DC. Rock the House. It's okay. Nothing special, but it just rocks. Sweet Candy. Ripping stuff again from Stevie Young. Solid track. Emission Control. Good track. Good solo from Angus. Okay, first album without Malcolm, of course. I mean, Stevie Young had to step in some big shoes. I think they're still trying to find their feet again. Brian sounds okay. It's got some good tracks on it. It's a good album, but I don't think they'd hit the road running. I think there was a lot of. It was just all strange for them, I think, and you can tell. But it's still a good album. I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 8 out of 10. Okay, coming in number 12, we have the 13th album, released in 1995, and it was the return of the Thunder drummer Phil Rudd, Ballbreaker. Saw them on this tour, so this was the first time that I'd seen Phil Rudd in the band, and it's the it was that second classic lineup, and it is a great lineup. Opening track, Hard as a Rock. Nice guitar solo from Angus. Phil's brilliant back on the drums. Driving riffs and Malcolm, cool song. Cover You in Oil. Lyrically, it's not the best. They're a bit weird, the lyrics, but I like the tune. It's typical AC/DC, isn't it? The Führer. Brian is on fire on this. Great track. Boogeyman, my favourite. It reminds me so much of the Jack, and I love the Jack. It's got that little boogie rock to it. It's a really solid track. The Honey Roll, again, great song. Proper AC/DC riffing. Good guitar solo from Angus. Does what it does on the tin. I know I keep saying that, but it's right. Burning Alive, another track with some ripping riffs on that. Hail Caesar, it's an okay track. It's not my favourite, but I do like it, because there's not a bad track on this album. Love Bomb, the lyrics a little bit mediocre, but again the sound and the guitars are brilliant. Caught With Your Pants Down, it's alright. It's a little ditty, again not very good lyrics, but you can't have it all, Whiskey on the Rocks, this is classic AC/DC, great sounding. Then we get Ballbreaker, awesome track. All I can remember of this is on the stage, Brian sitting on the end of this Ballbreaker and singing. It's just brilliant. Great stuff. Okay, great return for Phil Rudd, of course. To me, he is AC/DC drumming. He is a brilliant drummer. Timing is superb. He is tight. The music on this is great. Some of the lyrics are a little bit weak, but it's still a cracking album, and I'll give it an RTO ranking of 8.5. Coming in at number 11 then, we got the 12th album, released in 1990, The Razor's Edge, the only album to feature Chris Slade in a recording studio with AC/DC. So we've got Brian Johnson, Angus Young, Malcolm, Cliff and Chris. Opens up with the brilliant Thunderstruck. There's not much you can say about this one, is there? It's just a brilliant track. Second track, Fire Your Guns. Thumping bass line. Great riffs of Malcolm. Chris Slade belting on them, his drums. If you can't have Phil drumming, Chris Slade is a great substitute. Chris Slade's a great drummer anyway, but he really gives it all on that track. Then we get Money Talks, quirky. Love the solo in that. Really good track. The Razor's Edge, Really different sort of track for them. It's quite deep and dark, but it's a fantastic track. Mistress for Christmas. Okay, this is probably one of the only one of what, 3 or 4 tracks that I particularly don't like. Obviously it didn't make my great. It didn't. I didn't even get on worst Christmas tracks because it's not that bad to be on that. But it unfortunately didn't even make my favourite Christmas tracks. I just think it's a bit lame. Next track, Rock Your Heart Out. This is all about Cliff Williams again. Everyone's working around that great bass line. I bet he was so glad to get Phil Rudd back because they were on fire on that track. Then we get Are You Ready? Very special song for me. It's my favourite song. And as I appeared on the video amongst thousands of people dressed as prisoners, I had fond memories of that day. Okay, I heard this song about 50 million times, but it's just great. You know, meeting the band, chatting with the band. They were so. What I liked about it, in between takes, instead of disappearing, they would sign autographs, talk to fans, which upset the director a little bit. I mean, at one stage he was pulling his hair out, and Brian just looked at us and behind his back was making some very funny gestures. So it's a brilliant day. If you're watching this and you was in this video, put it in the comments box, or you know someone that was in the video. Great song, one of my favourite songs for certain reasons. Got You by the Balls. Great track. Great performance by Chris Slade and Cliff Williams. Awesome stuff. Shot of Love. Best thing about this track is that bass line and great guitar solo from Angus Young. It's just incredible stuff. Let's Make It. Cheesy lyrics but a great tune. Goodbye and Good Riddance to Bad Luck. Again, great bass playing from Cliff Williams. If You Dare. It's just one of them great tracks. Again, you've got the start with the bass, then Malcolm comes in, Brian comes in, and then you get Angus. Awesome stuff. Pretty strong album. Play this one a lot, and I'll give it an RTO ranking of 9 out of 10. Okay, we've reached the top 10, the quintessential AC/DC albums, the ones that if you've never been in to AC/DC, these are the 10 you go for. So starting at number 10, go to the 8th album, released in 1981, For Those About to Rock. We salute you. Or as it's referred to on the cover, For Those About to Rock. Whatever. Classic lineup. Produced by Mutt Lange, the third and final album that he produced for them. Opens up with a brilliant For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. I think this sounds a lot better live. It's a great track, don't get me wrong, but there's a stranglehold on Phil Rudd's drumming, and I blame Mutt Lange. Bit controversial. I think Mutt Lange is a fantastic producer. He needs to, you know, but he takes for an age to get something right, and I think this is it. He tried to clean this album up because it was 1980s. You know, he'd just been working, just about to work with Def Leppard again, and for the first time. You know, I think he just tried to clean them up. Put the finger on you. Solid track. Guitar works good on this, but you can't hear the drums very well, and you can't hear Cliff Williams. Let's get it up. Solid track. Inject the Venom. Love Malcolm's riffs on this, and a great vocal from Brian. Snowballed, great track. It's awesome. Evil Walks, solid. COD, great track. Great solos on this. Breaking the Rules. What some great solos, some Angus on this. Night of the Long Knives, solid track. Spellbound, solid track. As I said, this is Mutt Lange's last album that he produced for them. I love the tracks on here. They're great tracks, and the ones that you hear live are pretty good, and I've heard live versions of these tracks. I just think the production on it was a little bit too clean, but it's still a fantastic album, don't get me wrong. I just think Mutt Lange, his production was a little weak on this one, which is not a thing you say, weak and Mutt Lange together. I think this is another album that needs remixing and remastering, and I think you'd get the true sound of these sound. But don't take me around, it's a great album, and I'll still give it an RTO ranking of 9.1 because it is got some cool tracks on it. Okay then, coming in number 9, go to the 17th and most current album released in 2020, Power Up. The return of Brian Johnson, the return of Cliff Williams, who obviously Brian left halfway through the Rockle Bust because of his hearing. Axl Rose stood in. Okay, not the best singer in the world, but hats off to the man for helping out. Cliff Williams decided to retire. Phil Rudd, okay, he'd had a lot of issues, but this all come together after they sadly all obviously was at Malcolm's funeral. And what do we get? Them getting back together. So we got Brian, Angus, Stevie, Cliff and Phil. Great album. First track, Realise. Great to hear those great riffs again, that you know it's AC/DC. So great guitar solo on here and a fantastic drum performance from Phil. Rejection, solid. Great vocal from Brian. Brian back on form. Shot in the Dark. What a track. First track that we'd had it from AC/DC in a long time. First track we heard. It was the track that we was waiting for. Brilliant track. Then we get Through the Mists of Time. Great song, great bass line, fantastic. Kick You When You're Down. Classic AC/DC sounding song from the powerhouse that is Cliff Williams and Phil Rudd. Witch's Spell, fine track. Some of Stevie's best guitar work so far with AC/DC. He really feels part of that engine now, and plays a lot better on here than he did on Rockle Bust. Great track. Demon's Fire, fast becoming one of my favourite tracks on the album. It's just awesome. I love playing that track. Wild Reputation, Cliff Williams, brilliant. I couldn't think of anyone else doing the bass for AC/DC except Cliff or Mark Evans. Two great bass players, and Stevie's really cranking them riffs out on this one. Sterling job. No Man's Land, great. Some great riffs. Great solo, of course. Then we get my favourite track on here, Systems Down. This is just going back to the good old days of AC/DC. Them great backing vocals. I mean that with a lot of affection. They're so raw. Another power solo from Angus, brilliant. Money Shot, Brian sounds brilliant on this. His voice is crystal clear again, awesome. Code Red ends the album. Again, the rhythm and the bass is great. Great work from Cliff and Stevie. What can you say about this album? Best album of 2020. We needed this album in 2020. 2020 is probably one of the worst years you'll ever come across in my life. It was terrible. It was in lockdowns, and there wasn't much going on the music. And then this come out and sort of blew the cobwebs away. AC/DC is back. Brilliant. Great album, played a lot, and I'll give it an RTO ranking of 9.2. Okay then, coming in at number 8, got the 9th album, released in 1983. This was Phil Rudd's last album till Ballbreaker, and it is Flick of the Switch. Got that classic second classic lineup: Brian, Angus, Malcolm, Cliff and Phil. First track, Rising Power, awesome track. Opening riffs on this. I think they produced this one themselves, and that strangulation of the clean sound had gone. This is raw, this is plug-in and go AC/DC, and it's a great track. This House is on Fire. The drumming on this is great. Great to hear the drums again. That bass is thumping. Brilliant stuff. Flick of the Switch. Love the bass line on this. Great track. Nervous Shakedown, one of my favourite tracks on the album. Love Angus's solo in this. Blinding stuff. Brilliant. Landside, it's fast, it's furious. Great solo. Just great rock and roll. Then we get my favourite track, Guns for Hire. The start is just awesome. Angus's guitar work and that is great, and then he holds that in the riff, and then it's boom, in come the drums. Brilliant, brilliant. Deep in the Hole. Oh, some of Brian's finest screeching. Awesome track. Bedlam in Belgium, another great track. Love the energy in this. Malcolm is on fire. Badlands, again, Malcolm Young's riffs rip through this song. Brilliant. Brain Shake, solid, rich sounding song. This is the most underrated AC/DC album. I love the rawness of this album. Some great tracks. And I just love it. So I'll give this an RTO ranking of 9.3. Okay, coming in number 7. We have one of the albums that was only released in Australia in 1975. Second album, T.N.T. This album features Angus Young, Malcolm Young, Mark Evans on the bass, Phil Rudd. George Young plays bass guitar on a couple of tracks, and Tony Correnti plays on the drums as well on a couple of tracks. Opens up with the brilliant It's a Long Way to the Top If You Want to Rock and Roll. Awesome track, isn't it? Bon on the bagpipes. Awesome. Great track. Second track on here is Rock and Roll Singer, Gonna Be. Sorry, I love that track. Then we get the classic, The Jack. Still a firm favourite today, isn't it? Everyone sings that. Great track. Then we get my favourite track, one of my favourite tracks ever, probably my fourth or fifth favourite track by AC/DC, Live Wire. Love the opening bass from Mark Evans. Bon Scott on fire, as well as Angus. Brilliant. Then we get T.N.T. Oi, I just love that. Angus doesn't do much singing, but he always comes up for the mic for that one. Great stuff. Love Angus's guitar solo. He just goes mental in it. Then we get Rocker. I'm a rocker, I'm a roller, rah 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 controller. I like it. Little socks, tattoo, V8 car and tattoos. It's just brilliant, isn't it? Great little track. Love it live. Best version of that is actually on the If You Want Blood live album. Awesome stuff. Then we get Can I Sit Next to You, Girl? Bond's his vocal on this is quite eerie, but it's brilliant. I love the guitar work in this. I love the booginess of it. It's a great track. High Voltage, Rock and Roll, brilliant. Again, another firm favourite with the fans. Love Bond's vocals on this, terrific. And the album ends up with a cover of Chuck Berry's School Days. Brilliant. Great version. Okay, this album, it's got some tracks, obviously firm favourites to this very day. Obviously some are released on the international versions of albums to come, but this is truly a great album, probably the first AC/DC album that really has got that AC/DC sound on it. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 9.4. Okay then, we'll go to number 6. We go to the debut album, first released in Australia in 1975, but it was and this is the first international release again. In 1976, that would be also named High Voltage. So that's why we got the two covers. On here we've got Bon Scott, Angus Young, Malcolm Young. Some who else we got on here? We've got Rob Bailey on guitar on some of them, Pete Clark on some of the drums, Tony Correnti on drums, and John Prout does one thing. So the first we'll look at the Australia release. We've done this in the then and now, but I'll briefly go through it. Got a great version of Big Joe Williams' Please Don't Go. Ferocious version of it. You'll never hear anything like it before. Great stuff. She's Got Balls. Brilliant track. Love that riff. Awesome stuff. Then we get Little Lover. It's one of them slow bluesy tracks. Bon Scott's vocal on this is terrific, and a lovely guitar solo from Angus. Then we get Stick Around. It's again one of them tracks that I'm not particularly fond of. Again, it's one of them you can count on the hand. Soul Stripper. This has got Rob Bailey on the bass. It's quite funky for AC/DC, but really good. You Ain't Got a Hold on Me. It's okay, it's not the best song. Then we get Love Song. This is AC/DC going romantic. Just didn't work for me. It was horrible. Show Business. Great little track. Rock and roll at its best. So that's the Australian release. Now this is when they come to do the official first international High Voltage, obviously we've got a change of lineup. We've got Bon Scott, Angus Young, Malcolm Young, First appearance of Mark Evans, first appearance of Phil Rudd. It's got a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll singer, the Jack Livewire, T.N.T, Can I Sit Next to You Girl, Little Lover, She's Got Balls, and High Voltage. The original album was a bit raw, but pretty good. But if you look at the first international, you got that great combination of the first couple of albums. It's a great album. If I put on the international version, I love it. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 9.5. Okay, then coming in at number 5, we have the fourth album. Came out in 1977. It's the brilliant Let There Be Rock. This was Mark Evans' last appearance with AC/DC on an album. So we've got Bon Scott, Angus Young, Malcolm Young, Mark Evans and Phil Rudd. Opens up with the brilliant Go Down belting track. Great drumming. Dog Eat Dog, Eat Cat 2. Great riffs from Malcolm on that one. Then we have the thumping, brilliant Let There Be Rock. One of my favourite tracks. I love it live. It's just brilliant energy. Great bass playing for Mark Evans on this. Absolutely brilliant. Then we get Bad Boy Boogie. Brilliant track. Love the live version of this, especially from the Highway to Hell tour. It's when Angus does his little strip, of course. It's just a brilliant track. So we get Overdose. Brilliant, brilliant. Just love that track. Love the opening of it. That they think, oh no, we'll do we like that bit? No, we'll go with this bit. Brilliant. Then we get Crab's Body in Blue. Now this only appears apparently on the Australian version, because on the international it's Problem Child. Don't ask why, but I've got the version I brought, and the first time I got this was on cassette, and this was on it. I love this. It's one of them bluesy songs. Brilliant stuff. Then we've got Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be. Bananam, bananam. Great track. And then okay, probably one of my favourite songs, and it's everyone's favourite song. It's the one that starts da-na-na-na-na-na. Angus. Brilliant song. One of the best in the catalogue. One of the recognisable riffs. I just love Whole Lot of Rosie. Love the guitar solo in it. Brilliant. A classic album with some classic tracks. Still firm favourites today. And I'll give this an RTO ranking of 9.6. Okay then. Coming in at number 4. We have the third album, released in 1976. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. Bon, Angus, Malcolm, Mark and Phil. I'm going to do the Australian version first, because that was the first. That one came out before the international. We've got Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. This was the first track I ever heard by AC/DC, and obviously I've been hooked since that day. Great track. Love that solo. Brilliant stuff. Love the lyrics in this. Brilliant. Then we've got Ain't No Fun Waiting Around to Be a Millionaire. Okay, this has got the same riff all the way through until it goes mental at the end. And what I like about this as well, at the end you've got the beginning bit where he goes, "This is a true story, and only the names have been changed to protect the guilty." You know, in that iconic Bond's voice. And then towards the end you get a thing about Howard, and putting jumbo jets on airfields. Absolutely brilliant track. Then we got There's Gonna Be Some Rockin'. Great rocker. Brilliant. Problem Child, again, classic song. I like how it's beginning and the start is the same. Brilliant stuff. Then we get Squealer, thumping bass line from Mark Evans. Some of Malcolm's great little riffs in there. Then we get Big Balls, the double entendre song. The lyrics are very clever. Take it either which way you like. Brilliant stuff from Bon. Terrific song. Now, then we get a track called R.I.P. Rock in Peace. Wasn't on the international release, but it's a fantastic track. I love it. Then we get Ride On. This is my favourite slow blues track by AC/DC, without doubt. Love the guitar solo from Angus and this is truly brilliant. Then we get the best track on the album, but it didn't get on the international version. It's the brilliant Jailbreak. I love this track. I mean, it's a firm favourite with the fans because they did. I've seen them do it live, and it's a great track. So on the international one, the only one that's different, he opens up with Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, and then we get Love at First Feel. This is not on the Australian version. It's a great track. Got some solid riffs. Great backing vocal on here. Brilliant solo from Mr. Young. And then we get Big Balls, Rocker, Problem Child, There's Gonna Be Some Rockin', Ain't No Fun, Ride On, and Squealer. Great album, both of them. And when I play it, if I play one and then the next time I want to listen to the album, I'll play the other. Play them a lot though. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 9.7. Okay, coming in at number 3, you got the 6th album. First album that Mutt Lange produced. Sort of the album that really made them from stars to superstars. Sadly, it was the last album for Bon. So this is the last album with that classic lineup of Bon Scott, Angus Young, Malcolm Young, Cliff Williams and Phil Rudd. It's Highway to Hell, of course. Opens up with Highway to Hell, of course. Probably the most recognisable AC/DC riff. Great song. Great song. Can't deny that. But it's overplayed now. And if I never hear this song again, I won't be upset because it just gets it's just too much overkill on this track. But I'm not saying that it's a bad track, it's a brilliant track. But when everyone thinks it's the only track that AC/DC ever did, rubbish. They did some great tracks, of course they did. Girls Got Rhythm. Oh, love this. Great bass line from Cliff. Truly an amazing track. Then we get Walk All Over You. Highlights of this: the guitar solo, the backing vocal, probably the best backing vocal on an AC/DC track. Awesome. Then we get my favourite track off the album, probably my number 4 track of all time, the brilliant Touch Too Much. I think this is one of Bon's finest one of his finest vocal performances that he did with AC/DC. Brilliant song, and the guitar solo is magical. Beating Around the Bush, one of them quick, quirky AC/DC tracks. Angus on Fire. Then we get Shot Down in Flames. I think this is probably Angus's best guitar solo ever. Awesome. Get It Hot, one of Cliff Williams's booming bass lines. Everyone's working round it. Terrific. Then we get If You Want Blood, You've Got It. Solid track. Ripping guitar solo. Fantastic stuff. Love Hungry Man, another great little track. Great vocal from Bon, and I love the Cliff Williams bass line on that. Then we get probably one of the darkest songs ever done by AC/DC, the brilliant Night Prowler. Quite a bluesy number. Sad though, because this is when you put this track, when you get to this track, you know this is the last track you'll hear Bon Scott sing, and I just love the end bit. The last thing you'll ever hear, we have heard Shazbot Nanu Nanu. Little gem of an album this is. Not a bad track on it, but there's not any bad tracks. It's just a solid, great rock album, and I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 9.8. Okay, number 2, 7th album, released in 1980. First to feature Brian Johnson, of course, and it's the brilliant Back in Black. So we've got the second classic lineup now. Brian, Angus, Malcolm, Cliff and Phil. Awesome stuff. Opens up with Hell's Bells, from that daunting open with the booming bell, and then you get the first time we hear the delicate tones of Mr. Johnson. Awesome. Then we get my favourite track on this album, Shoot to Thrill. Every time I see them, it's either the second or third song in the set. Been a staple in the set lineups forever. It's so much energy. The drumming from Phil on this is just absolutely brilliant, and then you get that little solo coming in from Angus, and then you get some ripping riffs from Malcolm. Awesome track. Then we get What Do You Do for Money, Honey. Great opening riff, great bass line, booming voice of Brian. Terrific song. Giving a Dog a Bone. Malcolm's riff on this, the riff for this song is something unbelievable. It's hard, it's heavy, good stuff. Let Me Put My Love Into You, solid track. Then we get the title track, of course. Again, one of the iconic riffs, iconic tracks. Probably the best, one of the best tracks from Brian Johnson led AC/DC. Again, it gets played a lot, but I love this track. Then we get You Shook Me All Night Long. Now, when I first heard this, I loved it. I think it's a great track. I love the solo in it. But again, it is now played to death, and if I never hear it again, I won't get upset. But I've still got, I still like it, but I don't go mad over it these days. Have a Drink on Me. More classic Malcolm riffs here. Ooh. And then you get the great guitar solo from Angus. Shake a Leg. Probably one of the weaker tracks on the album, but it's still damn good. I just love the ferocious guitar riffs. Then we have another of my favourite tracks, Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution. I brought this on single. It's a slow rocker and I just love it. Just a classic album, isn't it? What a comeback for AC/DC after the shock of losing Bon. Contains some of their greatest tracks, this album, and I still think it's the best album Brian Johnson's ever done. And what a way to open up your account with AC/DC. Just pure brilliance. And I give this an RTO ranking of 9.9. So we get to my number one AC/DC album. This has been my favourite from the very moment I heard it. Now, first time I heard this, one of my best friends at the time, his dad, it was him that got me into AC/DC. And when he brought this, I remember going round and we sat in my mate's lounge, the three of us, and we put this on and it blew me away. And it's always been my number one. When someone asked me to do this, it was the first thing I put at the top of the list. And we're talking about Powerage, of course. Classic lineup. Cliff Williams' first album with them. What a way to start. Opens up with Rock and Roll Damnation. Great rock and roll. So the solo is brilliant in this. A lot of people say, oh, it's one of their weaker songs. It isn't. It's a brilliant song. Down Payment Blues. The first real chance of hearing the Cliff Williams bass line. Brilliant track. Then we get Gimme a Bullet, thumping bass again from Cliff. Phil's drumming on this is brilliant. Malcolm's riffs are great on this. Then we get to my favourite AC/DC song of all time, Riff Raff. Best version of this obviously is on the live album, but this is just awesome. From the opening, and then it goes off at 500 miles an hour. Brilliant. Love that track. Next track, Sin City. My second favourite track by AC/DC. I love the riff in this. And my favourite bit of this bit is the bit in the middle when you get the bass, Bond's little vocals, and then that little bit of a guitar solo from Angus. Still a favourite. Great stuff. Next track, Who's Next to the Moon. Phil's drumming on this is absolutely killing. Outstanding. Malcolm's riffs are brilliant. Love this track to death. Gone Shooting. Again, Cliff Williams making a very, very prominent start with AC/DC. One of his best bass lines, actually. Fantastic. Then we get my third favourite AC/DC song of all time, Up to My Neck in You. Brilliant rocker, great solo. Wish they'd do this live. It's brilliant. And the album ends up with Kicked in the Teeth, Ripper. Absolute ripper. Great solo. What a way to end the album. Okay, when it's got your your favourite 3 tracks ever by AC/DC, this album is always going to be your number one, isn't it? There's just something about this album. Its rawness. It's, they really hit the groove with this album. The whole album is probably one of the heaviest albums they did. It's the fastest rocking album, and it's always been my number one from the minute I heard this album. So I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 10 out of 10. Of course I had to, because it is just pure brilliance. Okay, it's always a pleasure to do my favourite bands. I'm so passionate about this band. Probably my second favourite band of all time behind The Quote. But I'll know there's a lot of you love AC/DC as well. So if you were in the Are You Ready video, or some of them was, I'd love to hear about that. So please put it in the comments box below. So that's all for today. Tomorrow being Thursday, we have got Then and Now, and we're going to do some bit more on the punk theme we did last week with the Sex Pistols. Now we're going to look at another fine punk band, the Ramones, again one of the pioneers of punk. And then we're going to do some album cover of thrash metal giant Metallica. So that's all tomorrow, and we've got a live stream tomorrow round about 8 o'clock tomorrow night. If you can join me for that, I would love that. It's just basically an update what's been going on, what we're doing next week. I'm gonna try and do this at 8 o'clock on every Thursday now, so something to look forward to. So until tomorrow, have a great day or great night whenever you watch this. Bye for now.